Okay folks, so a question I get asked a lot is why I prefer full body training as opposed to body part splits. It's kind of an outdated notion of body part splits, so I'm going to try and explain it very, very quickly. Now, what we see here is essentially what happens while you are training, the muscle breakdown, the super compensation, then the return back to baseline, okay? So, to break it down as quickly as we can, starting on this far side, our initial performance baseline, okay? So that's where we are now, the condition we are in, the body shape, potentially the strength, etc. Now, when we go into a training session, what we are trying to do is break down muscle tissue. We're trying to hurt it. We're trying to create as much damage as we possibly can in a controlled environment to then elicit an adaptation response, which results in supercompensation, okay? Now, for the majority of people, of course, it's going to be different person to person, but for the majority of people, this will take 2 to 3 days if the stimulus within the training session has been correct, okay? So if we train here, we dig ourselves into a bit of a hole, essentially, we cause damage. It will take us 2 to 3 days for our body, providing nutrition, rest, recovery, etc. is on point, to recover to a point which is higher than the baseline. The reason it recovers to a point that is higher than the baseline is so that if necessary, it can withstand the same beating next time. This again is why progressive overload is important, to always aim to lift more. After these 2 to 3 days, we hit a point of supercompensation. Now, that is the ideal point to restart this cycle, okay? So if we were to imagine we hit that point and then we do some damage again with a training session, the baseline, the lower end of this training session starts here, and then we supercompensate and we rise up there. Then we hit it again. And what you end up seeing is a steady curve that goes up and up and up and up and up. We're always progressing. Now, what most people tend to do wrong is the traditional body part split style workouts, which is, you know, if you're lucky, especially in the early stages when you're going to adapt to pretty much anything, you can get quite a lot out of it. But for the most part, for body composition training, for ongoing gains, ongoing strength gains, ongoing body composition improvements, you want to move to a full body, slightly lower volume style training session. The reason being that is if you are, say, training one body part a week, as a lot of people do, the old kind of traditional body part splits, is we create the muscle damage here. Let's say we have a big chest session. We've smashed our chest to pieces, tons and tons of volume, broken it down. Now, 2 to 3 days, we hit our point of supercompensation where potentially if we hit again, we could get plenty of growth. Instead, we do not utilize that point and we allow the body to recover until it returns back to baseline. We then repeat this stimulation cycle here rather than here. Therefore, instead of constantly progressing like we think we should, like we want to, we actually end up basically taking 1 step forwards, 1 step back, 1 step forwards, 1 step back, which is what you want to be doing, what you want to be doing is taking 1 step back, 2 steps forward. Supercompensation occurs, then you stimulate the muscle to grow again. What you end up seeing, as I say, is from baseline, you will end up seeing a curve, a progression curve, that goes something like that over time. Whereas if you simply train and constantly return to your baseline, that curve will remain along this line. If you screw it up too much and you train too soon, which happens to a lot of people who are training every single day and not recovering, etc., what you can actually do is re-stimulate somewhere around here. Let's try an X, I can't do it with that angle. Then you actually end up going down, okay? So we see the 3 options we have here. We have a pretty linear level where we're not progressing at all. We have a point where we could be training too frequently, training a muscle too much. Our strength and ability baseline actually goes down, our body composition actually falls apart, or we can hit it bang on with the right amount of volume, the right amount of training frequency, aim to hit that point of supercompensation every single time, and our progression curve always rises, in theory. Again, there's a lot that goes into that: rest and recovery, adequate training volume, making sure that the training volume here is bang on to ensure that you are not creating so much damage that your body can't recover and you miss the curve. You get the idea, but there's a massive subject within that. But in doing this, by training your full body 2 to 3 times a week, this allows you to stimulate each muscle every 2 to 3 days. Whereas if you are training one body part per se, you're going to take 5 or 6 days before you return to that body part, and you miss taking advantage of how this system works. Best way to do it, for me, what I always advise for the majority of people is optimal sets. If you are genuinely training hard, things can be slightly different on an online training style protocol. But if you are training really, really hard, anywhere between, let's say, dependent on the muscle group, 8 and 16 sets per muscle group over the week cycle, okay? That's what you should be trying to plan for. Dependent on how you react to each one. Some people react to higher volume, some people react to lower volume. Some people's bodies will react differently to different amounts of volume dependent on where they are, okay? The only difference is, and what I plan into the Live Up plan is I plan slightly higher volume for most people. The reason being, most people probably aren't training as hard as they should be. Therefore, the extra volume is going to ensure that their training stimulus is adequate. This is the only variable. Bear this in mind. It could be the reason that you haven't been progressing. If you find that you are recovering too quickly, you may not be training hard enough. If you find that you are recovering too slowly, you may be in here. You may be training too soon. Everyone is going to be different, but somewhere between 2 and 4 days for each training session is probably going to be about right. This is why I tend not to like people training 2 days in a row. If you have any questions about this, do drop me a message, drop me a comment so I can go into it again, but hopefully this gives you an idea of why I plan the Live Up plans as full body training sessions on the whole, because it works with this curve perfectly. It allows you to constantly progress by taking advantage of the stimulus, the damage, and the super compensation. Remember, if you constantly train too much, all you essentially end up doing is you are digging that hole again and again and again, and you end up regressing. Very, very simple. I hope that's given you a little bit of information on how that works. Probably could have been clearer and a bit neater, but hey ho.